Let's talk for a moment about Tim Walz. Now there's a new report not only about stolen valor. Oh, wait, the Muslim cleric he's hosting. This guy was celebrating October 7th attacks. He's sharing press releases from Hamas.
Of their own land and walk free into their lands that they were not.
On at least 5 occasions, vice presidential nominee Tim Walz hosted a Muslim cleric who celebrated.
I'm a husband and I am a father to 2 beautiful children. And this is Peggy Flanagan, a state legislator, a mother, and we are running together as governor and lieutenant governor. I would like to, first of all, say thank you to Imam. I am a teacher.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
I'm a husband, and I am a father to two beautiful children. And this is Peggy Flanagan, a state legislator, a mother, and we are running together as governor and lieutenant governor. I would like to, first of all, say thank you to Imam. I am a teacher, so when I see a master teacher, I know it. And over the time we've spent together, one of the things I've had the privilege of is seeing the things in life through the eye of a master teacher to try and get the understanding, listening today to the stories and what it means. But there were two examples of this. And last summer, and many of you were probably there, there's so many reasons that we're proud of Minnesota, the things we think about it. But most of all, it's the people. We have beautiful lakes, we have beautiful opportunities, but we think of the people and the goodness of people. And so last summer, after the cowardly terrorist attack on Dar al-Farouk, Minnesotans gathered together. And thinking of living here as long as I have, and in that moment, it looked more like Minnesota than I'd ever seen it. It felt more like Minnesota than I've ever seen it, and it felt like who we are more than we'd ever seen it. And it was Imam talking, in those times is where we find who we are. In those times is where we really see. And I know as a community, you are Minnesota. You have made Minnesota better. You are my neighbors. You are my children's friends. You are the people who built the great tapestry that is Minnesota. And I think as an elected official, one thing is especially, you don't need me to give you a sermon, but you should expect me to try and live one. And I've spent my life working. I'm a cultural geography teacher. So I've talked about the great diversity of the world. I've lived and spent time in China. I've traveled extensively around the world. And I tried to expose my students to the beautiful diversity that's the world. And that included talking about comparative religions and what our people believe in the spirituality that makes us truly human. And that is a key piece of this. And at a time when the Imam's right, the world may not be fair, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and make it a little fair. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try and live.
That's Tim Walz displaying his love for the Hamas Nazis. Welcome to Whistleblower Wednesday on the Rob Maness Show. And we're live on Worldview Tube and X-Spaces simulcast. Well, Coach Waltz, or is it retired Command Sergeant Major Waltz, or is it hunting buddy, good old boy neighbor Tim Waltz? Well, listen to this from Front Page Magazine, and I quote, Democrat vice presidential candidate Tim Waltz is being skillfully marketed as an all-American average guy. That's one thing he is not. And in reality, he is just about the diametric opposite of that. Most Americans are not even aware and never will be of how sinister he really is. To hear the Democrat Party's propaganda machine, that is the establishment media, tell it, Waltz is your neighbor across the fence who has surprisingly sensible solutions to the nation's problems. A homespun, small-town high school teacher, a football coach, somebody that you can trust your kids with, and a good-hearted man to whom you can trust our nation's future. Well, this is, of course, a massive load of baloney, and it's already falling apart, close quote. And in fact, this man is great friends with fellow travelers like Imam Hassad Zaman of the Muslim American Society of Minnesota, who said, and I quote, on October 7th of last year that he stands in solidarity with Palestinians against Israeli attacks, close quote. Well, my guest today is Robert Spencer, who wrote those words from Front Page. And I quoted that on purpose. And he's the author of a brand new book called Muhammad, A Critical Biography, which takes a detailed look at the Islamic traditions regarding Muhammad and lays bare their contradictions, their inconsistencies, and their incoherence. Mr. Spencer, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Hey, good to see you, Rob. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're very busy, and I want to give you a chance to pitch the book a couple times during the show, but let's dive right into this. Is the imam that Waltz was addressing in that clip there this guy that supports the October 7th?
That's the one. This is Assad Zaman. He is a member of the Muslim American Society of Minnesota. And so not only has he praised October 7th, but we should also remember that this is a man who has recommended a revisionist movie saying that Hitler was really a good guy. And so this is a very deep a hater of Jews, somebody who any politician ought to have more sense than to be standing next to. Not only, and much less praising, but not only all that, the Muslim American Society that Assad Zaman is part of is the Muslim Brotherhood's arm in the United States. And the Muslim Brotherhood, according to a captured internal document, is dedicated, in its own words, to eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their own hands and the hands of the believers. And that by their own hands part means that's us. We're going to destroy ourselves, and they're going to make it happen. And I think Tim Waltz is a prime example of how they are succeeding at doing just that.
Yeah, so the party, they had a choice. I mean, Harris and her team and the party had a choice. Why did they pick the pro-Islamist guy? What's your opinion on that?
Well, the other guy they were going to pick, everybody thought that it was already a done deal, and maybe it was Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. And the problem with him is that he's Jewish. And the party right now is deeply anti-Jewish. And so if they had picked Shapiro, even though Shapiro was busy denying his whole background, disavowing a paper he wrote way back when he was in college, defending Israel, saying, I was just 20 years old, and just throwing away every shred of integrity that he ever had to try to get this nomination, then he didn't even get it. But the thing is that the Democrat base right now hates Israel. They're socialist internationalists who want to destroy the Jewish state, destroy the United States of America as well, and establish a globalist, socialist, internationalist megastate. But they need those Muslim votes in Michigan and Minnesota and elsewhere, and they've been pandering to them by betraying Israel. Biden sent $10 billion to Iran after October 7th. And many other more millions to Gaza, which means to Hamas. And so they've been courting this vote, and it would have been counterproductive for them in trying to win this vote if they had picked Shapiro, and so Waltz it was.
It's amazing. I think it's hard for people to believe. What kind of feedback do you get from everyday Americans when you're out and about, Robert? Because, I mean, we're 23 years almost beyond 9/11 now, I've fought in that war. The people that I served with all fought in that war. The people I served with at the Pentagon that were survivors of that attack. We planned the response, but it seems like Americans, and you write about this in your article, have been really propagandized to think something different about Islam. As to what the reality is. What is that and why?
Well, the thing is that after 9/11, George W. Bush on September 17th, 2001, just 6 days after the attack, went into the mosque in Washington, D.C. in the company of Nihad Awad of the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is identified as linked with Hamas by the Justice Department, and Abdurrahman Alamoudi of the American Muslim Council, which no longer exists, and Alamoudi is in prison for financing Al-Qaeda. So these are the people George W. Bush was being told what to say by. and he said, Islam is peace. And in doing that, he actually was not just saying polite words one day that was a one-off. It became the policy, the bedrock foundational policy of the United States government, that Islam is peace had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks. We're not going to look at this ideology. We're not going to try to know our enemy. We're not going to study what happened on 9/11. We're just going to go in and try to build Western-style nations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, of course, since the whole enterprise was wrongly conceived, it failed. And ever since then, the United States government has never acknowledged that there is any such thing as an Islamic jihad threat. And so nowadays, Tim Walz, he thinks it's just a matter of political calculation. He needs these people's votes, so he goes to mosques and he praises them, and then they pull the lever for him. That's as simple as it is, and he knows there's no political downside, that actually the downside politically is all on the other side, that he doesn't want to be risking being accused of Islamophobia. He doesn't want to be accused of racism. And so there is no loss for him going to the mosque and plenty to gain. But unfortunately, as I noted before, the Muslim Brotherhood is trying to sabotage the United States and destroy it. And one of the ways that they're doing that from within is by turning unwary, self-serving politicians who haven't done their homework, like Tim Walz, and using them for their own purposes.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen closely to my introduction, I think it's very clear he's a person that that can be bent to other views and ideology fairly easily, including the Chinese Communist parties. And we don't have time to go into that on this show because I want to cover this territory about his love for the Islamists and the Hamas. I call them Hamas Nazis because I don't want to give them quarter. You know, and he's there. And you mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood and the connection there, but there are other groups that he has been hanging out with, people in those groups that are just as bad, do things like provide money and those kind of things. And one of them is the Council on American Islamic Relations, right, CARE?
Oh, yeah.
He was at their conference in 2019. I think you wrote about this. Who was he hanging out with there? And what are their views on things like October 7th?
Yeah, he spoke at the CARE's Islamophobia conference, CARE Minnesota chapter in 2019. Hatem Bazian was there. He is a professor of Islamophobia. Now, when I was in college, we didn't have professors of Islamophobia. Islamophobia hadn't even been made up yet, but now it's a thing. And it's actually a word that was made up in order to scare people into thinking that it's wrong to oppose jihad violence and Islamic law's oppression of women. Makes them, oh no, it's racist and bigoted, I better not go there. And this is one of the ways that the Islamic movement has made tremendous gains in the United States. So Walz was crazy to speak at this conference, playing right into the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood linked Islamic groups, but also the co-founder and the current executive director of CARE, Nihad Awad. After October 7th, he said the whole thing made him happy. October 7th, a massacre of 1,200 Israelis under the most brutal of circumstances, and he was happy about it. And so these are the kinds of people Tim Walz is hanging around with. And like I said, he doesn't think there's anything wrong with it because politically, the way the world is today and the way the left is today, there's just no downside.
Yeah, and he likes to do this in the name of diversity, and that diversity is our strength. And I don't know, folks, if you noticed in that clip there, he's actually said that Islamists that he was talking to in that mosque were the fabric of what created Minnesota. And the truth couldn't be further away from that statement, quite frankly. Well, we've got to take our first break, Robert. When we come back, though, I want to talk more about that and the campaign's response before that video clip that we showed at the beginning of the show came out. I'm Rob Maness. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. We're blowing the whistle on waltzing with Hamas. The article written by Robert Spencer, the director of Jihad Watch, and author of the new book about Muhammad, which we'll also talk about in a minute. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHouseBG.com.
On at least 5 occasions, vice presidential nominee Tim Walz hosted a Muslim cleric who celebrated the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. Asad Zaman of the Muslim American Society of Minnesota joined other Muslim leaders in May of 2023. They met with Walz's gubernatorial office in Minnesota to discuss mosque security. Zaman also attended a May 2019 event Walz hosted for Ramadan. Walz's ties to Zaman could serve as problematic baggage for the Minnesota governor as he campaigns. Zaman said on October 7th of last year he stands in solidarity with Palestinians against Israeli attacks. He also uses his Facebook to share official Hamas press releases along with other anti-Semitic content. The Muslim leader reportedly promoted a film popular among neo-Nazis that glorifies Adolf Hitler.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're our guest is the director of Jihad Watch and author Robert Spencer. And Robert, before that first clip we showed came out, and this news that was just reported in the second clip was breaking, the campaign actually denied that Walz has a relationship with this imam. And I think you document that he's met with him multiple times. And I didn't bring this clip in, but there is a 1-minute clip of his prayer at Walz's inauguration. Look, if you're being inaugurated to the governor of a state or president of the United States, you don't just call somebody you don't know to say the prayer at the ceremony, do you?
No, those are the kinds of honorary positions that go to people who are close to the new official. And so it's very clear that these guys have been friendly for years. I don't know if they socialize or anything like that. That's not it's not even necessary, but it's very clear that Walz knows exactly who he is. Walz wants his support, has actively courted a cordial relationship with him. It's incredibly dishonest on the part of the campaign to act as if this is just some casual nodding acquaintance. I mean, after all, it was Zaman who Walz was talking about in that opening video you showed, where he's standing in the mosque and his lieutenant governor is standing there with the hijab and he's praising the imam to the skies. That's Zaman that he's talking about. And it's very clear that he knows him. I'm just amazed. I wish that I could say this is astonishing or surprising in the sense that I didn't think he would do it. Unfortunately, it's all too predictable that leftist candidates would be dishonest. But it's amazing to me that they're so brazen about it because they know they can get away with it. They know you will call attention to it, but the New York Times, CNN, the Washington Post, all the rest of them will cover for him, so he won't really pay any political price.
Yeah, just like they're covering for him on his lies about his military record, which he's really, if he doesn't even lie about his military record, he's got a really strong military record. He should just stick with it instead of making stuff up about it. But no, and the big media, I'm glad you mentioned them, they're covering for him, and they attack poor J.D. Vance, who's who is a great messenger and communicator, really. I think the American people that were kind of on the Republican side that were concerned about Vance being on the ticket have been shown that he's a really effective communicator, especially against this lying media that we have. What they did with him was accuse him of embellishing his record, and all he's ever said was, "Look, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I got out as a corporal. I did a tour in Iraq. I didn't." He even says, "I didn't even serve in combat," which he did. He was deployed into the combat zone, even though he stayed behind the wire. He was still getting fired upon by rockets at Al-Assad and mortars. It was at the height of the surge, and that's what the media does. So aren't they doing just a huge disservice to the American people? Look, we've had over 150 people on the terror watch list, most of them Islamist, I'm sure, that have come through the open southern border that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are responsible for and encouraging and cheerleading. 99 of those, it's been reported, DHS has let back out into our society without monitoring. I mean, shouldn't the American people be concerned that we have a media that won't report accurately on people like Walz and their love for these groups of people that really they are opposed to what America is, and they're opposed to our closest ally and only democracy really in the Middle East, and they're not just opposed to it, Robert. They want the Israeli people and Jews annihilated completely. And I think that's what we saw an attempt to do on October 7th.
Oh, right? There's no doubt about it. Absolutely. And we have to understand at this point, Colonel, this is the propaganda arm of the far left. The news media is not really news media. It's not anything. It's not as if they have strayed from their mission. Their mission is to transform the United States into part of the socialist internationalist state that they want to create. And so they are not good. They cannot be trusted. They are not ever going to tell us the truth. And we have to understand that accordingly. And that includes Wikipedia, since you mentioned it. And Vance, it's important to note that Vance had the whole string of citations that he received from his military service. And Wikipedia, at the time of the Walz controversy, excuse me, it scrubbed them from Vance's record. Now, Vance legitimately was awarded all those citations, but Wikipedia didn't want him to look good in comparison to Walz. It's really insidious because Wikipedia, people just assume, is a trustworthy source. And it's just as much of a propaganda outlet as the Times and the Post and CNN and the rest of them.
Yeah, and part of the messaging to defend Walz on this on his military embellishments is that look, Vance was they attacked Vance for his real record. Well, he was just a public affairs guy. He stayed behind the wire. He didn't really do anything, etc., and really denigrated the actual record of J.D. Vance. And they're whining about. Especially us veterans that have banded together to call Walz out on his lies about his military record, not his truthful record. I say it all the time. Look, folks, his military record is one that's honorable. He should be talking about that, but he's not. It's the 3 or 4 big lies that he's told over a 20-something year period that is the problem, and he's getting political gain about it, and it establishes trust with the American people, which is another reason why I wanted to do this show with you, Robert, because we've got to blow the whistle on this guy. He's obviously pro-Islam. Do you think he's an actual anti-Semitic guy? I mean, this imam has posted pro-Hitler stuff, right?
Yeah, I doubt that he knew that. I'm not wanting to be in the position of defending Tim Walz, but when you ask if he's really anti-Semitic, I really kind of doubt it. I think that he's probably sort of the unthinking leftist who just does whatever the party tells him, whatever position they want him to take, he'll take it. And so now the party has turned sharply against Israel. He's sharply against Israel. The party tells him Islam is peace and we need to make friends with the Muslim community, so he does that. but I don't think he has principles that are
That's
very
even
deep.
worse.
Yeah, he's just a useful
That's
idiot.
even
really.
worse than being an outright anti-Semite because it opens the door for all this stuff that we've been seeing. Well, we've got a live audience, sir, and I do take questions, and we've got some hands up over there. So let's go over to our host, Shell, in the live audience on X Spaces, and take a question. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Brian Gamble, sir.
Hey guys, hope you can hear me. I'm driving outside of Cincinnati here, but if I rubber band, I apologize. I just wanted to say I'm a huge fan of Jihad Watch. I've been following since early 2000 when I was trying to make heads and tails about what I experienced in the former Yugoslavia about 8 years prior as a young sailor. But with the open borders, sir, what do you think the probability is that we will see a jihad launch of attacks inside the United States of America?
Well, you know, Rob just said that there have been about 150 people on the terror watch list who've been caught at the border over the last few years. And that means that's just the people who are caught. The jihadis have been paying attention. They see that there's no border, and they've been taking advantage. We don't know how many got through without being caught. And not only that, there's a concerted effort by the Biden regime to cover up what is going on. And so very few Americans know, but there were 2 migrants who were in the United States illegally, Jordanian citizens, who just recently tried to get onto Quantico Marine Base. And they could not produce the proper credentials. They couldn't explain why they were there. When they were told to stop, they kept going. And finally, they were stopped by vehicle barriers. Now, the worst part of this story is that one of these guys, Hassan Hamdan, was on a terror watch list, which the Biden regime kept denying, but finally it came out just a few days ago. They finally admitted, yes, he was on a terror watch list, but he's in the United States, released on bail, along with his partner, Mohammed Dabbous, and nobody knows where they are now, and nobody knows what they're doing now. But they already tried, under highly suspicious circumstances, to breach Quantico. That, I think, answers your question. We have people actively trying to carry out jihad terror attacks. They're on the terror watch list. They're roaming around free in the United States right now because of our irresponsible leadership.
Yeah, and I'll just remind everybody that about the incident with the Special Forces colonel near what used to be Fort Bragg, where 2 Chechens were casing his home, posing as utility workers of some sort, and he shot one of them. That story has been completely swallowed up in memory hold, and I think, unfortunately, we have a media and government officials that really just aren't interested in getting the truth to the American people these days. As a matter of fact, they hide things quite frequently, which is, for somebody that served in government for over 30 years of his life, and prided myself in being transparent as possible to the public. That's pretty damning, quite frankly, behavior from especially government officials, and then the media that's supposed to be the watchdog. And this show isn't intended to bash on the media, but it exists because the media won't do his job. And I think your organization exists for many of the same reasons, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely so. It was way back, well over 20 years ago, and we were looking for reliable news about jihad activity, and there wasn't any. Because even when the events were reported, the motivating ideology behind them was never fully explained and often actively covered up, which of course is still going on now more than ever. And so we started Jihad Watch at that time at jihadwatch.org to provide a source where people could get all the jihad news, as well as understand why all this is happening, why these people are doing this, and what they're trying to do. This is something that's basic, that all the major media sources ought to have been instilling into the American public after 9/11, but instead they all went into full cover-up mode.
Yeah, I mean, basic. I'm glad you brought that word up. This is basic journalism. Let's take Waltz and his love for Hamas, for instance. Basic questions like, look, Governor, you are connected multiple times over the years with this imam and here's a video of you speaking about him being a master teacher. He's pro October 7th, pro Hitler, it seems. What are your thoughts on that? And why did you have him do the prayer at your inauguration? Are you really that close in a relationship with him? Well, we got to take our next break, Robert. When we come back, though, we'll hear from that CARE executive director, Nihad Awad, and we can talk some more about him and the relationship he has with Waltz. And we'll take another question from the audience. I see we've got a hand up over there. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and waltzing with Hamas is the topic, because Tim Waltz, he's a Hamas Nazi lover, and we got to expose it. Robert Spencer's my guest. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
The people of Gaza only decided to break the siege, the walls of the concentration camp, on October 7th. And yes, I was happy to see people breaking the siege and throwing down the shackles of their own land and walk free into their lands that they were not allowed to walk in. And yes, the people of Gaza have the right to self-defense, have the right to defend themselves. And yes, Israel as an occupying power does not have that right to self-defense. Gaza became the liberation source, the inspiration for people. Gaza transformed many minds around the world, including people who are not Muslim. What kind of faith these people have? They are thankful. They're not afraid. And Israel did not scare them, because they knew that their heaven is in Gaza. And if they would like to die, they will go to another heaven. That is the faith of the people of Gaza. And that's why Gaza and the people of Gaza were able to transform everyone who's watching. They have learned from these people. And those who felt bad for Gaza, they don't understand the equation. Those who thought that the Gazans are less than those who can help them, they are mistaken. They are mistaken. The Gazans were the victorious.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and Tim Waltz, he's literally in bed with the Hamas Nazis and CARE and other organization. And that was the executive director of one of the CARE organizations. My guest today is Robert Spencer, author and director of Jihad Watch. Mr. Spencer, one of the things that jumped out to me immediately in that clip is that Israel has no right to self-defense. That is an unconscionable statement.
Yeah, you know, this is a line that CARE took after October 7th, because not only do we have Nihad Awad on video saying that, but Hussam Ayloush of CARE Los Angeles said exactly the same thing. It's a talking point that they formulated, that they've been pushing on unwary American non-Muslim college students who, you know, they don't know the history, they don't know the politics of the region. They get indoctrinated by their professors into thinking that Israel is this evil occupying power. And they are told this because it seems just common sense that after an attack like October 7th, that any state would be perfectly justified in defending itself against an attack of that brutality and that magnitude. And so they're trying to take that away from Israel and erode support for it by claiming that Israel being unjustly constituted in the first place, which is false, that it has no right to self-defense.
And it's been under attack by Arabs and Muslims ever since. Quite frankly, the history of it, folks, you should go out and study that history and make sure you fully understand what the truth is. The other thing that I noticed in that speech is he never used the word Hamas, unless I missed it. He only talked about Gaza and the people of Gaza. And I'm pretty sure that the people of Gaza are not very happy with Hamas, who is not only their government, but responsible for the paramilitary force that did the combined operation against southern Israel on October 7th. They can't be very happy with it. Right?
Well, actually, unfortunately, after October 7th, there was a survey showed that support for Hamas among people in Gaza had actually increased because these people have been indoctrinated literally since birth to hate Jews, hate Israel, and so they really don't have a problem with Hamas. The only free election that they've had in Gaza actually elected Hamas when everybody thought the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas would take control of Gaza. Instead, the people in Gaza, they chose Hamas. Now, you're absolutely right. There are people in Gaza who hate Hamas, and sometimes we see them on video. There was a guy quite recently saying, you know, we should be attacking Hamas, not attacking Israel. Hamas is the one that's caused us all this misery. So there are Gazans who understand that. Unfortunately, I think that it's pretty clear that they're a minority. But it's also noteworthy what you say about how Nihad Awad never uses the word Hamas. He knows that Americans know that Hamas is a terror group. And he's not going to come out and publicly state that he is in favor of a terror group because he made that mistake. He made it in 1994. He was in a panel discussion. It was on video. The video is available. You got to hunt for it. But he says, I am in favor of the Hamas movement. And he has gotten a lot of trouble since then from people who know what Hamas is all about. So now, 30 years later, he knows how to speak more carefully, but his meaning is still unmistakable. And we should also note, Rob, that he is a liar like Tim Walz, that he refers to Gaza as a concentration camp. Now I ask you, what concentration camp has ever fired rockets out at the neighboring areas? And what concentration camp has ever been free to teach its children that they need to hate and destroy and eradicate the surrounding nations? What concentration camp gets billions and billions of dollars from the UN, the United Nations, the European Union, and the United States? The idea that it's a concentration camp is once again just an attempt to manipulate and hoodwink people into thinking that Hamas is justified and has the moral high ground. And he's very good at what he does, but he's not an honest man.
Yeah, they've had decades to perfect this propagandizing techniques that they use. I also noticed that Wad, he justifies Israel not being able to defend itself as occupiers, but Israel hasn't occupied Gaza before this response from October 7th since before pre-2005, if I understand correctly. So, folks, you got to know the facts. Well, let's take another question from the audience over here. We've got a hand up. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Chris, sir.
Shell, Colonel, Mr. Spencer. I thought they were going to choose Shapiro too, but I think he had too much stuff on him, and so they picked the Waltz for the Muslims. Also, I wanted to ask you, with the Muslims in Minnesota and in Detroit, is that why they picked this guy to be pro-Hamas in our own country as a vice president? I'm just amazed. I just don't know why.
That is absolutely 100% why they picked this guy. We have to remember that Rashida Tlaib, the notorious congresswoman from Michigan, she and Nihad Awad, who we just saw of CARE, they both have warned, they warned Joe Biden at the time that he wasn't going to get a single Muslim vote in November unless he pressed Israel for a ceasefire. Now we have to understand a ceasefire sounds good, but it's actually something that would allow Hamas to regroup and to survive to carry out another October 7th attack another day. If the Israeli government has said they're going to destroy Hamas completely, and a ceasefire would prevent them from doing that. So Tlaib and Nihad Awad, they want a ceasefire because they want Hamas to survive. They love Hamas. And so it is in pursuit of the votes that they threatened to withhold that the Biden-Harris regime picked Tim Walz. They think that he is so close to the Muslims, like Assad Zaman and Nihad Awad, that he will keep them from not voting at all because they hate that the Biden regime still ostensibly supports Israel.
Yeah, I mean, and there was a movement, I think, in Michigan to not vote by the Muslims. That I think they counted over 100,000 voters that didn't vote during the primary for Joe Biden as a protest. That's a significant number when we're talking about these swing states, especially Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and Nevada. Because I mean they're wavering between 10 and 20,000 votes whoever wins. I mean Biden only won Georgia by about 11,000 votes in 2020, even with all the fraud. So it's tight. The polling has always shown the swing states to be pretty tight no matter what's going on. So yeah, that's pretty damning. What they've done here and what they're talking about. We got another hand up in the audience. Let's go ahead and take that question before the break. And then when we come back, we'll continue this discussion. Go ahead, Show.
Lead Carter, sir.
So I would like to know if I'm an ex-Democrat, even though on the ballot it still says I'm a Democrat. I've woken up and I've seen what's going on with Israel and Palestine, and I've seen kind of the wool that's been put over my eyes. And I'm just curious if people like me who see what the Democratic Party is doing and are aware of it, but technically we're kind of part of the problem. If we're, and we step back and we say we're no longer going to be a part of this, are we worth redemption? And do you think that we could rekindle friendships that were lost because of the division?
Well, everyone's worth redemption, but as far as rekindling friendships with the hard left, I wish you luck. But I have never known people who were more ideologically committed. And we have to remember also that for the most part, for the average Democrat nowadays, this is their religion. They don't believe in God. They don't go to church. The politics that they are committed to is the most important thing in their lives. And so, as far as they're concerned, you are a heretic. You are somebody who has strayed from the fold of the blessed. And so they can do nothing but shun you. And you should be glad if they only shun you and don't abuse you instead. And so I certainly hope that I'm wrong about that, but I expect that if you were friends with people who are still committed to the Democrat program at this late date, then they're hardcore ideologues, and they're probably not going to want to be friends with somebody who is no longer.
Yeah, that's a great answer. It's a tough question. Look, every American is redeemable. As long as that American chooses to come back to the fold, not of a religion, so to speak, but of the idea of Americanism, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the Constitution that's supposed to underpin that, and get away from this all-powerful bureaucracy type government that we have now and back to that Constitution. We're all redeemable if that's what we want to come back to. But I think you're right, Robert. I mean, it's really tough I think that the far left and this crowd is part of that. Waltz is a leader of that. Have gone so far off of the beaten path of Americanism that it'd be very hard, even if they decided to come back, it would be very difficult for people to trust them and give them power again once they lose it. And we've got to take that power away from them. Well, we've got to take our last break, Robert. When we come back, I want to give you a chance to talk about the book. And we'll hear from Seb Gorka about the Waltz pick and what he thinks about it. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
Let's talk for a moment about Tim Walz. Now there's a new report not only about stolen valor. Oh, wait, the Muslim cleric he's hosting. This guy was celebrating October 7th attacks. He's sharing press releases from Hamas. I mean, again, this man's character is so disturbing, and you have to wonder if they missed some of this in the vetting.
I don't know if they did anybody. They just knew they had to throw the Jewish governor on the bus because, you know, the pro-Hamas, pro-jihadis in Minnesota, they're not going to vote for her. So, look, look at the paper trail. They've already deleted the title Command Sergeant Major from Kamala Harris's website. What does that tell you? This is going to be huge. That pro-jihadi imam that Waltz is associated with, he, as governor, gave his organization more than $100,000.
Yes.
I don't think he can run from any of this. And the stolen valor, I carried a M16 in war. Which war? You deployed to Italy. Were you carrying your M16 as you sipped that cappuccino in the Palazzo?
Exactly.
This is the typical Democrat lying to your face and using service to the nation just to further his political career. This could get him in big trouble.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're blowing the whistle on Tim Waltz and his love affair with Hamas and the Islamists. And this group of people, my guest is Robert Spencer, the director of Jihad Watch and author of the new book about Muhammad, a biography. And Robert, I had forgotten about the dollars, the funding that Waltz has pushed to that organization of this imam. No wonder he speaks so highly of him and each other. They're in a dollar deal together, it looks like.
Yeah, and the dollar deal is for votes. And so you're never going to get Tim Waltz to disavow this imam, no matter what comes out about him. He'll just say if he's cornered, and this is the problem, that we don't have a free press, we don't have an adversarial press, we have this sycophantic propaganda press. They're never going to ask him, what about this praising Hitler? What about his praising October 7th? Waltz is probably never going to be asked. He's never going to have to account for it. But if he is, he'll just say he didn't know anything about it, or it's a right-wing conspiracy theory or some nonsense. Like Gorka said, they just lie to our faces, and they do it repeatedly and brazenly.
Yeah, they sure do. Well, let's talk about your new book for just a minute here before we go back to the audience and continue the discussion about Waltz. So tell the folks about the book, when it's going to be out, how it'll be available, and what the main thrust is in this biography about Muhammad.
Yeah, this is Muhammad, a critical biography. It's available for pre-order now, and it'll be out September 10th. And it is, there's never been a biography of Muhammad like this. And I don't know if anybody who reads this could ever come away thinking this guy is the prophet of Allah, or even this guy was a real historical person. Because one thing I do in this book is I look through the earliest Islamic traditions about Muhammad and show that they don't actually tell a single story. They are full of contradictions and competing versions of the material. For example, there's some Islamic traditions. This is not adversarial traditions, but Islamic traditions that say, well, his name wasn't actually Muhammad at all. It was Kutan. And he didn't have the angel Gabriel appearing to him to give him the Quran. It was the angel Seraphel. And all these little details, every detail of the Islamic story is contradicted by another Islamic story. But the story's been smoothed out, and nowadays we hear about it and we're told this was a historical figure. He wasn't. This was myths and legends.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mentioned that I was in the Pentagon during the 9/11 attack. Well, after that, the military wasn't organized for a global war. It was organized for a regional war, so our strategic assets had to be shared. So they asked the team that I was an assistant to put a plan together. And the initial part of the plan was we had to research Muhammad and the teachings in the Quran about him because we wanted to get some idea of bin Laden's decision-making calculus and the lens that he might be using. And that was one of the pathways we chose to go down. And it was very difficult for us. Although we were using fresh eyes. None of us were Muslim, so we're just looking at the text, trying to glean some information from it that we could use in developing a response to this and maybe predict what might be going to happen next. And it was extremely difficult because of the contradictory nature of the writings about him. It's very interesting.
Yeah, see, this is something that's skillfully exploited by deceptive imams like Assad Zaman and others, that you have Muhammad saying, don't kill the women and children. And a lot of people right after 9/11 were saying, see, 9/11 is completely un-Islamic and Islam is peace because Muhammad said, don't kill the women and children. Well, there's another story where people killed women and children and he says, okay. And so it's completely contradictory because these are just fables and legends that were made up by different groups, and they would put whatever the position they wanted to favor, they would put into Muhammad's mouth and make up a story of Muhammad favoring it. And so it's a funny thing that you mentioned that you did that, because I actually did that for about 5 years after 9/11 myself. I was an independent contractor, but I would go in and speak to FBI and military groups and teach them about Muhammad and the Quran and Islam. And that was one of the things that Barack Obama did when he became president. He put a stop to that because Muslim groups complained and said that I was Islamophobic and so on. They didn't say what I was teaching was false. They just used this made-up word. And of course, he fired me and others like me immediately and removed all mention of Islam from counterterror training and from the United States of America's counterterror approach. And it's never been restored.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the gentleman that I worked for as their assistant, one of their recommendations was to put the studies, this level of study, into the Joint Force, War College, and Staff College level to make sure our up-and-coming officers had a good understanding of this, because we knew that this was going to be a long haul. As a matter of fact, before I left the Pentagon in March of 2002, and before I left, they were already calling it, the slides were titled The Long War. Well, let's go over to the audience and take some more questions real quick before we get to the end of the show. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Yellow Jacket, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick point that I live in Minnesota, and so I've seen what Waltz has done to our state. Mm-hmm. And, watching through 2020 and the riots and the hypocrisy and how the police were basically, they had their hands tied behind their back. They couldn't do anything, and it was okay. So, I've seen the damage, and then going to the state fairs, which is highly political, I saw the great, the smear campaign toward Waltz. Like, Minnesotans hate Waltz. He's not popular here. They had like propaganda throughout the whole fair slamming Waltz. He's not popular here, and somehow he won. He won his next term here, and like, I didn't vote for him, and I can tell you a lot of people didn't vote for him. So I'm highly suspicious of votes. I think they're rigged. That's just how I see it.
Well, thank you. You know, he did win by a very narrow margin in his reelection, didn't he, Robert?
Yeah, I believe so. And I wouldn't be in the least surprised if there were chicanery going on. Of course, as we know, the 2020 presidential election was rigged in so many different ways, and then it became this terrible offense to say so. It was conspiracy and misinformation and so on. And yet so much has come out since then that just confirms that the whole thing was not on the up and up. So I wouldn't have any problem believing that Minnesota was also stolen for Waltz, and his vice presidential candidacy then demonstrates just how dangerous these things can be, because these guys go on and they don't just do damage in their own state but become nationally prominent, and it gets even worse.
Yeah, just last night, Ilhan Omar won her primary, and she had a competent challenger who had come really close, within a couple percentage points of her the last time. So, but they got her a bigger margin this time, I saw, just to make the point. We've got one more question. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Rick, sir.
Hey, Shell, thanks. Hey, Colonel. Always a salute to you, my friend.
Thank you.
I just want to kind of piggy off what Leaf Carter was saying earlier about leaving the Democrat Party. I got off that bandwagon back in 1997 when I decided to use my own brain, my own mind, to do my own research. And I researched both parties. And it was a wake-up call for me once I did my research. And what woke me up, the first thing that I found out is when I found out that the Republican Party didn't come on the scene until 1854. But yet I could trace slavery all the way back, back into the 1600s and late 1500s. And so things are just not adding up to me. And I'm like, okay, this is not making any sense. How is the Republican Party is the racist party, the party of white supremacy, the party of the KKK and all this? And then that's when I found out that the Democrat Party owned the Confederacy, and they're the ones that started the KKK and all this. And just to make a long story short, that's what really woke me up. And, then that's when I started finding out things about Ulysses S. Grant, was an Army general that became president, that was a Republican, and that was almost 1,300 Republicans lynched with almost 3,500 blacks because the Republican Party was helping free slaves register to vote. So the Democrat Party, we had the black community believe that they gave us the right to vote. But to speak to your point about this governor out in Minnesota, this guy is a bad apple. And Mr. Spencer, Colonel Maness kind of really stole my question, but I was going to talk about the money. Would it be fair to say that the money is the main drive of all of this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The money is definitely the main drive of all of this, because that's why the Democrats want the power, so they can get the money. And they are engaging, look at Ukraine, that we've got to fight this war in Ukraine. And really, it's this massive money laundering operation for the top level Democrats. And so the whole thing about power for them is tied in to money. They're not doing this for love or even doing this because they're committed Marxists, although they are, and they want to see America become a socialist state. That's true, but also they're going to be the elites in the socialist state. In the Soviet Union, remember, they preached how everybody was equal, but the people who had the power lived in beautiful houses and had yachts and limousines, and the common people lived in the cramped one-room apartments. So it's going to be the same thing here. That's their vision. They're going to be the Soviet elites of the United States.
Well, thank you, Mr. Spencer. We appreciate you coming on, and thanks for doing the book, folks. Go find the book. It's available for pre-order. I'm going to get my copy of it because I want to read what Robert's written there. Tell folks how they can find you on social media real quick before we have to close out the show.
Yeah. I'm at Jihad Watch RS on Twitter. We're banned on Facebook, but you can find us also at jihadwatch.org with news and commentary every day about jihad activity that you won't hear anywhere else.
And it's very important. I've been reading it for several decades now. So thank you very much, Robert. We appreciate you. I hope to have you again sometime. Well, tomorrow is Truth Thursday, folks, here on the Rob Maness Show. And Commander Randy Arrington, U.S. Navy retired, actually wrote 2 essays in that book we covered last week. Don't Give Up the Ship, How Woke Ideology and Politics is Destroying the U.S. Military. We're going to talk about his essays and continue this discussion about Waltz and his stolen valor. We'll see you tomorrow on the Rob Maness Show at Worldview 2.